old. Being a pastor is a job, but it's also more than a job. It's who you are. We talk about having a pastoral identity. A lawyer who becomes a judge has to have a judicial temperament. Disciples who become pastors must have a pastoral identity because we're pastors all the time, not just when we're inside the church building. But we don't just do pastoring, we are pastors. Now, I didn't go to seminary wanting to be a pastor. That was not goals. I went because God told me firmly twice to be a pastor. And so I decided I better give it a shot. So at least I could say I did. And I was my full self in class because why not? Let them tell me I'm not what they want. That's perfectly fine with me. But to my surprise, the professors who were mostly pastors or had been pastors quickly identified something in me they called my gift for ministry. It was the gift of breaking big, complex ideas into little bites so that real people outside of academia, people in the pews, could understand the big ideas. I don't know what that's called on the list of spiritual gifts, but that's what they said mine was. And they used what they saw as my gift in class all the time. The professor would be teaching and he'd stop and say, Kimberly, don't call me that. That's what he called me. Kimberly, please share about this political philosopher with the rest of the class. And I'd been doing that since second grade, when the teacher was getting a kick out of making a little girl repeat over and over again the definition of noun that she had misunderstood. And the teacher kept saying, why don't you say again what you think a noun is? And laughing at the kid's response. And I finally turned to the other kid and I said, look, a noun is not a person plays a thing like a saxophone. It's a person, place, or thing. Like you in the classroom with the pencil, you, classroom, pencil, person, place, thing, nouns. And the kid went, cool. Noun's a person, place, or thing. Not a person plays a thing. And the teacher looked at me and gritted her teeth. Some people should not be teachers. Some lawyers should not be judges. Some disciples should not be pastors. And that's what I worried about through seminary and my early career. What if I'm a disciple who's really not set up to be a pastor? Did I have a pastoral identity? I mean, all I knew was this one thing. My professors all thought I did well, so I just leaned into that. I can understand my audience and explain things, and I could do it in really subtle ways. But I'm not naturally subtle. I'm blunt. My people are Yankees. And the East Coast last summer was such a vacation because everybody just said exactly what they thought, especially downtown New York City. They just say exactly what they think. Earlier in my career, I was weighed down by this idea that my gift was knowing my audience and saying things so people could understand. I was leaning into that, and I ended up sitting in a counselor's office with a raging case of what is known as compassion fatigue. It wasn't about work. It was that my work didn't stop. I didn't stop working unless I was sleeping. I was always thinking very carefully about what I said and who I was saying it to before I said it in my sermons, at meetings, at work, in my personal life, in my family relationships. I was always only thinking about the other person. And I was burned out completely on people, on my job, and at home. This is sad, but I used to daydream about getting some weird, highly contagious disease. And they'd put me in the hospital and hook me up to an IV and turn off the lights and put a sign on the door that said no visitors. Can you imagine pastoring and having that as your favorite daydream? And that's why I went to a counselor, because that's not healthy. That's not healthy thinking. Something was wrong. And so the counselor said, you have a raging case of compassion fatigue. And she told me I spent too much time and energy figuring out how to say things to people in the best way for them. And I really only needed to think about doing that for my sermons. And maybe if there was some complex problem I needed to solve carefully. But the rest of the time, I shouldn't even be thinking about how someone was going to receive how I wanted to say it. She said, just say it. As long as it isn't intentionally cruel, you can say whatever you think. She explained to me that if I was going to spend my life loving others, I first had to love myself. And I said, that sounds vaguely familiar. I preach that all the time. She said I was leaning so far into this one aspect of my pastoral identity, but she said, Kim, you've been a pastor for years. You eat, sleep, and breathe it. You're pastoral in all kinds of ways. You don't, not just in this one way. You don't have to be pastor 24/7 to everyone you know. You still have to love who God made you to be and just be yourself in some spaces. My pastoral identity had swallowed my own. And that's why I was so burned out. And so her mantra for me was just say it. I mean, imagine me sitting in a counselor's office not being able to say, just say it. Like, I just say it. As long as it wasn't intentionally cruel, like a certain second grade teacher I once knew, just say it. Just say it. So anytime I caught myself outside of sermon or presentation prep, thinking about how I was going to say something in the best way for the other person to understand, I stopped and I just said it. And I discovered that I rarely had an inclination to say anything intentionally cruel, which helped me realize, maybe I was pastoral in ways I hadn't recognized. It was like someone had turned on the lights in a dark room. I had all my energy back. I had tons of time back. I had my creativity back. Resentment faded. I loved my job again. I was pastor. I was me. I was happy. And someone in my personal life said, look, I don't know what changed, but you've gotten a lot harder to deal with. You were easier how you were before. Do you maybe want to figure out what's wrong with you and apologize? And I said, no. Hi, I'm Kim. The lights were back on, and I wasn't going back to the dark I had created for myself. I referenced, let me say it carefully, Plato's cave last week. And I got a couple questions about it, mostly because people wanted to know where there is a cave made of Play-Doh. And because we take internal T's and turn them into D's in American English. I'm talking about Plato's cave, which is a reference from his work, The Republic. Plato was a Greek philosopher, a student of Socrates. I know some of your brains just clicked off, okay, because I said Greek philosopher, but I want you to turn back on. It's not going to be any weirder than any other Sunday, and it's not going to be too hard. Plato had this idea that if you were in a cave your whole life, you were locked in this cave, strapped down in this cave, and all you could see on the wall were the shadows of things, and you never saw those real things, you just saw the shadows, you would think the shadows were real, that they were the real things, because you'd never seen anything different. Now let's listen to Paul at the end of his famous poetic diatribe about love. For now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So a professor read that in a Christian history class that I spent playing Diablo 2 on my laptop with my friends, because something had to make that class interesting. Like, even the professors were bored. And the first row was like the 7 people who were interested in the class. And then the second row was people who had laptops with Diablo 2 on them, playing Diablo 2 on a local area network. And the third row wrapped all the way around us, and they were the spectators. And they just came to class and watched us play video games. And the professor read this part of Paul's 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians about love in the mirror, and out of my distracted mouth popped, oh, Plato's cave. Plato's cave. And the professor said, Kimberly, don't call me that, would you please explain to the rest of the class the connection you just drew? And I had to close my laptop to concentrate, which turned off the LAN and irritated the rest of the 2/3 of the class, because, now we're down. And I told the class what I told you about shadows on the wall and the cave, and how the scripture from 1 Corinthians, which we hear so often, suddenly takes this turn into Greek philosophy. And we see now, in some translations, in a glass dimly or in a mirror darkly, and if you think about how mirrors were made, they weren't made in factories back then. Like, it would just be some kind of mildly reflective surface. So it's almost like Paul is saying that we only see the shadows on the cave wall and think they're reality. It's almost like Paul read Plato's Republic. And the professor said, Kim, Paul read Plato's Republic. And I said, I read Plato's Republic. And he said, I can tell. And then he invited me to listen to the rest of the class. Really listen, instead of doing whatever it is you're doing on your laptop. And just listen, because I'm going to talk about the Neoplatonism of Paul. And I went, oh, and I listened, and I stopped playing video games in class, because the lights had gone on in me. It wasn't that video games were bad. It was just that I could play them at home when my work was done. But in Christian history class, although it was known as the most boringest class God ever put together, I used my laptop for taking notes from that point forward, because Plato's Republic. It was fun to play with my friends, but now I could see it was a waste of time and energy to be doing that in class. Now the lights were on. From experience of my own and from listening to others, I think I can safely say we waste a lot of time and energy on things that do not matter and burn us out for what we're supposed to be doing. We leave ourselves in the dark because that's what we've gotten used to. We're supposed to be the light of the world. The light the dark world needs to reflect the light of Christ, to take it out with us when we go out these doors. That's the theme for the year, be the light. Remember, we gave you headlamps. But it's so easy and so comfortable sometimes to keep our own lights off. Because, we're used to it. We've developed habits, like I did playing video games in history class, or preoccupations, like I had about being so cautious about how I said what I said, to whom I said it. And those things dim our own lights. They make that, like, the reflection in the mirror is dark, right? And the light we're supposed to shine out gets dimmer. In Luke and Matthew, Jesus said this thing-ish. He said it differently. I'm going to give you Luke 11:33. No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden or under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand so that those who come in may see the light. Jesus knows what we're prone to do. Jesus didn't light us up with his love so that we could cover up ourselves, to dim ourselves, to stop shining and live in our own darkness. Jesus didn't light us up for us to climb under the bed or cover ourselves up with the bowl or pull the covers up over. Jesus lit us up to give light so others can see too. So what's the answer? How do we find and stop what we're doing that dims us, what's wasting our time? Paul, and I'm only saying this because I started paying attention in history class, Paul gives us the answer in his diatribe on love. He says, you can do all these things. You can be the best speaker in the world. You can understand and know all the things. You can give up everything and publicly suffer. But even if you do all these things that make other people think you're great at discipleship, if you don't have love, none of it matters. It's all empty. The words are empty. The knowledge is empty. The hardship it's all shadows on the wall. It's not reality. Plato argued that philosophy and education are the things that turn on the lights. Paul thinks it's God. We only see shadows. We only know shadows sometimes and think that's the truth. And nothing can set us free but God. In the next life, Paul argues, we will know as well as we are fully known by God already. And in the meantime, what are we to do? Love. Just love. Love God. Love ourselves. Love others. Love is the answer. And that's why this weird little Plato-inspired thing is stuck in this beautiful passage Paul writes on love. God's love is what lights us up. It's what lit us up. Remember when you first believed? But when we fail to love ourselves, when we learn to be cruel to others, when we are preoccupied and habit-worn, burned out from all the trying to do good so others will know we're good, the answer is love. More love for God, more love for yourself, more love for others. Paul says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. You know who does that? Somebody who's burned out. That's not what love looks like. Paul continues, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. We sometimes fail at love. We fail to love God or others or ourselves. But love is what God has given us. And love is the answer to the dimness. Love. Do you ever find yourself thinking, you just want to be left alone? Burned out? Is your personal life overdrawn? Jesus knew we could feel like that. You don't light a lamp to put it under the covers. Jesus knew he didn't light you up so you could hide. For me, it took learning to say, just say it. Just say it. For you, it's probably something else. I don't know. Whatever it is for you that dims your light, that turns your days into nights, that wastes your time and energy and preoccupies you, ask God to help you find it and remove it from your life. Love yourself enough to let God's light shine through you. He lit you up for a reason. Whoever you are, however you are, lights on. Amen.